I'm Leah, 35, and literally last weekend, my role as the family's invisible glue, yeah, it totally backfired. The piece I'd worked my butt off to keep solid as a nurse, always there for everyone, it blew up into a full-on family meltdown at my dad's wedding. My father, who's always favored my stepbrother Brian, straight up demanded I smile and play nice, and when I clapped back, the room went dead silent. "You're embarrassing us," my stepmother hissed, with every guest staring like I'd set the cake on fire. But here's the tea. Their shade didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note, this story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Brim Revenge. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now, back to the story. I've always been the one smoothing things over. Dad's temper, Brian's arrogance, my stepmom's passive-aggressive digs. Growing up, I thought if I tried hard enough, I'd earn a real seat at the table. I became a nurse not just for the job but because I believed in caring for people, in being the steady hand when life got messy. I'd show up for every family event, every crisis, hoping they'd see me. But Dad? He'd brag about Brian's corner office, his fancy car, while my 12-hour shifts saving lives got a shrug. "That's nice, Leah," he'd say, eyes already on Brian. Last weekend's wedding was supposed to be different. I dressed up, practiced my smile, told myself I could handle one more night of being overlooked. But the moment I walked into that reception hall, I felt it. The same old hierarchy. Brian, golden boy, at the head table with Dad and his new wife Carla. Me, shoved to the back, the last table by the kitchen doors, with distant cousins and a random plus one. I sat there, clutching my napkin, my face burning as I realized I wasn't just out of place, I was an afterthought. The clink of glasses, the laughter, it all blurred as I stared at my plate, untouched. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, but instead, I just sat, my hands trembling in my lap. That's when I knew. No amount of playing nice would ever make them see me. Something snapped, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, like a thread finally breaking. I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I stood, my chair scraping softly, and walked out, their voices fading behind me. As I left the wedding, the cool night air hit my face, but my mind was already racing back. Years of being invisible flooded in. I was 16 when I first noticed Dad's eyes light up for Brian. Not me. I'd just won a science fair, my project on wound care earning a blue ribbon. I rushed home, certificate in hand, grinning like a kid with a secret. Dad barely glanced at it. "Good job, Leah," he mumbled, then turned to Brian's report card. Straight A's, of course, and launched into a 20-minute speech about his future CEO. My smile faded. I tucked the certificate under my arm and slipped upstairs, my chest tight. By 25, I was a nurse, pulling night shifts in the ER, saving lives during a flu outbreak. I'd call Dad, exhausted but proud, sharing stories of patients I'd helped. He'd hum, distracted, then pivot. "Brian closed a big deal today, 6 figures. I'd bite my lip, nodding into the phone, feeling like background noise. At family dinners it was worse. Brian's promotions got toasts. My stories about stabilizing a crash victim got polite nods then silence. Once at Thanksgiving I mentioned a patient who'd thanked me with tears in her eyes. Carla, my stepmom, cut in, "Brian's buying a condo." The table erupted in cheers. I stared at my plate, fork frozen, my throat burning. I'd swallow it every time, thinking if I worked harder, cared more, they'd see me. But they never did. Brian's corporate wins were gold. My quiet victories, stitching wounds, holding hands through pain, were invisible. I'd go home, replaying their dismissals, my hands clenching my steering wheel. I wasn't jealous of Brian's success, I just wanted my own to matter. Each memory stung, but that wedding night, walking away, I realized those moments weren't just slights, they were a pattern. I'd been chasing their approval my whole life, like shrinking myself to fit their mold. My shoes clicked on the pavement as I left, each step heavier with the weight of those years. I wasn't just leaving the reception, I was done begging for a place in their world. My heart pounded, not with anger but with clarity. I'd built something real, something mine, and they'd never seen it. I didn't need their validation anymore. The city lights blurred as I drove home, my hands steady now, gripping the wheel with purpose. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. I was done being their afterthought. Driving home from the wedding, my mind drifted to the secret I'd built. The one thing they couldn't touch. 2 years ago, I'd hit a low point. Another family dinner, where Dad praised Brian's new yacht, while I sat, my latest nursing certification ignored. I went home, stared at my ceiling, and felt this fire ignite. I wasn't just a nurse, I was damn good at it. That's when I started my project, a community health outreach program I ran on my days off. I'd spend hours organizing free clinics, teaching first aid, helping single moms navigate Medicaid. It was grueling. Late nights planning, early mornings hauling supplies. My hands would shake from exhaustion, but every thank you from a patient, every kid who learned CPR, made my chest swell. One moment stood out. A woman, Maria, grabbed my hand after a clinic, her eyes wet. "You saved my son's life," she whispered, her grip tight. He'd had an asthma attack, and my training kicked in. Calm instructions, steady hands, oxygen mask in place. I hugged her back, my throat tight, feeling seen for the first time. I never told my family. Why bother? They'd never get it. The program grew, local papers covered it, hospitals called me for advice. I'd built something real, something bigger than their approval. My apartment became my war room, papers strewn across my table, my laptop glowing with spreadsheets. I'd sip coffee, my fingers tapping nervously, wondering if I could keep it going. But I did. By the wedding, I'd helped over 500 families, all while working full-time. It wasn't just work. It was my armor. My proof I wasn't invisible. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. Another clinic volunteer thanking me. I smiled, my hand still on the wheel, the wedding sting fading. I'd walked out of that reception, but I hadn't left empty-handed. I had this. My purpose. My impact. My family could keep their head table. I'd built my own. I stepped out of the car, the night quiet except for crickets, my breath steady. I wasn't just surviving their neglect, I was thriving in spite of it. My keys jingled as I unlocked my door, each step into my apartment feeling like a reclaiming. I didn't need their applause. I had Maria's gratitude, the kids' smiles, the weight of lives changed. That was my spark, and it was burning brighter than ever. I tossed my purse on the couch, my shoulders relaxing for the first time all night, ready to keep building, no matter who noticed. The morning of Dad's wedding, I stood in my bedroom, staring at the dress laid out on my bed, a simple navy thing I'd picked to blend in. My fingers brushed the fabric, hesitating as I braced for the day. My outreach program was on the cusp of something huge. A local hospital had offered a partnership that could fund clinics for years. I'd been up late, triple-checking proposals, my laptop screen glowing as I typed, my coffee cold by 2 a.m. My hands shook with excitement, but also dread, because today, I had to face my family. The wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a gauntlet. I knew the drill. Brian would be center stage, Dad's pride and joy, while I'd be lucky to get a nod. I zipped up the dress, my jaw tight, telling myself I could handle one more day of their indifference. I glanced at my phone, texts from my volunteers, wishing me luck. Their support felt like a lifeline, grounding me. I slipped on my heels, my movements deliberate, like suiting up for battle. In the mirror, I looked polished, but my eyes betrayed me, nervous, tired, hoping for a miracle. I drove to the venue, my hands gripping the wheel, replaying last night's call with the hospital director. "Leah, this could change lives," he'd said. It was the kind of validation I'd craved from Dad but never got. Pulling into the parking lot, I saw the banquet hall decked out in white roses and fairy lights, a picture-perfect scene that made my stomach twist. I sat in the car a moment, my fingers tapping the dashboard, whispering to myself, "Just get through it." I thought of Maria, the kids at my clinics, the lives I'd touched. They were why I kept going, not this family charade. I grabbed my purse, my shoulders squaring, and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my heels. The air smelled of jasmine, but it did nothing to ease the knot in my chest. I wasn't here for love anymore. I was here to survive the day, to walk out with my head high. As I approached the entrance, I saw Brian's car, a sleek BMW, parked like it owned the place. My heart sank, but I straightened, my lips pressing into a thin line. This was it, the moment before the storm. I'd face their world one last time, but I was already building mine. Walking into the wedding reception, I felt the air shift, heavy with perfume and judgment. The banquet hall sparkled, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, clinking glasses, but my eyes went straight to the seating chart. My name, Leah, was scrawled in tiny print, tucked at the last table by the kitchen doors. My stomach twisted as I navigated the crowd, my heels clicking on the polished floor, dodging cousins' half-smiles. I sat, my hands smoothing my dress, trying to look unbothered. The table was a mix of strangers and distant relatives, none of whom knew me beyond the nurse. Across the room, Brian held court at the head table, his laugh booming, Dad beaming beside him. Carla, in her glittering gown, leaned over to whisper something, and they all chuckled, their eyes never once glancing my way. Then it started, the subtle jabs. My aunt leaned over, her wineglass tilting, and said, "Leah, still doing that nursing thing? Must be exhausting." Her tone dripped with pity, her lips curling like I was some charity case. I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around my fork. "It's rewarding," I said, my voice steady despite the heat creeping up my neck. Another cousin chimed in, "Brian's killing it, huh? VP now, right?" I nodded, my jaw clenching, as the table launched into a chorus of praise for him. I stared at my untouched salad, the lettuce wilting under the dressing, mirroring how I felt. Shrinking, overlooked. A waiter bumped my chair, not even apologizing, and I realized I was literally in the way, a fixture as useful as the folding doors behind me. My hands trembled under the table, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to stand, to shout that I'd built something real, that my clinics had saved lives, but their voices drowned out my thoughts. Dad stood to toast, his eyes locked on Brian, calling him the son I always dreamed of. The room cheered. I sat frozen, my breath shallow, my heart a dull thud. No one noticed me. Not even when I pushed my plate away, my fingers brushing the tablecloth, desperate for something to hold on to. The contempt wasn't new, but tonight it felt sharper, like a blade slicing deeper with every smile that wasn't for me. I glanced at the exit, my pulse quickening. I wasn't just invisible, I was disposable. That realization settled in my chest, heavy but clear, as the music swelled and the room spun on without me. The reception's noise, laughter, clinking glasses, faded as Dad's toast echoed in my head, his words about Brian slicing deeper than any before. Then Carla stood, her smile tight, and raised her glass. "To family," she said, her eyes skimming the room, landing everywhere but on me. The crowd cheered, but I felt the air thicken, my chest tightening like a vice. I pushed my chair back slightly, the scrape lost in the applause, my hands gripping the edge of the table. That's when Brian, glass in hand, leaned toward Dad and said, loud enough for my table to hear, "Guess Leah's still just here." His smirk was casual, like he was stating the weather, but the words landed like a slap. My cousins at the table shifted, avoiding my gaze, their forks clinking awkwardly. I froze, my breath catching, my fingers curling into fists under the tablecloth. It wasn't just a dig, it was a verdict. I didn't belong. Dad didn't correct him, he just chuckled, patting Brian's shoulder. My heart pounded, each beat screaming what I'd always known but never faced. They saw me as nothing. I stood, my legs steady despite the tremble in my hands, and smoothed my dress. "Excuse me," I said softly, my voice barely audible over the music. No one at my table looked up, they just kept eating, pretending I hadn't spoken. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking, my purse clutched tight. The room spun on, dancing, toasting, oblivious. Outside, the night air hit me, sharp and cold, clearing the fog in my head. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just kept walking, my steps deliberate, each one pulling me further from their world. My car keys jingled as I unlocked my door, my hands no longer shaking. I slid into the driver's seat, the silence deafening, and stared at the dashboard. This was it. I was done. No more calls, no more visits, no more hoping they'd see me. I'd spent years trying to fit into their mold, but that moment, their dismissal so blatant, broke it for good. I turned the key, the engine humming, and drove away, the venue's lights fading in my rear view. I wasn't running, I was choosing myself. My phone stayed silent, no texts, no apologies. They didn't even notice I'd left. But for the first time, that didn't hurt. It freed me. I was done being their afterthought, done begging for scraps of love. I had my work, my purpose, my life, and that was enough. A year after walking out of Dad's wedding, my phone buzzed on my kitchen counter, the screen lighting up with Carla's name. I froze, my hand hovering over a mug of tea, steam curling in the morning light. I hadn't spoken to any of them since that night. No calls, no texts, just silence I'd chosen. My fingers twitched, hesitating, but I answered, my voice flat. "Hello?" Carla's tone was frantic, not her usual polished venom. Leah, it's your father. He's sick, heart failure. We need you. My stomach dropped, but not for the reason she'd hoped. She rushed on, explaining how Dad's condition had worsened, how Brian refused to help, how they couldn't afford private care. You're a nurse? She said, like it was my duty to swoop in. I stood still, my bare feet cold on the tile, my free hand gripping the counter's edge. The audacity hit me. They'd ignored me for years, but now when it suited them I was essential? I saw Dad's face in my mind, his proud grin for Brian, never me, and Brian's smirk at the wedding calling me just here. My jaw tightened. I took a slow breath, the tea's warmth grounding me. I'm not coming, I said, my voice steady, each word deliberate. Carla gasped, then pleaded, He's your father? I stared out my window, the city waking up, people who valued me waiting at the clinic I'd built. You made your choices, I told her, my fingers tracing the mug's handle. So have I. She sputtered, but I hung up, my heart racing, but not with guilt, with clarity. I set the phone down, my hands no longer trembling, and sipped my tea, the bitter taste matching the truth I'd faced. They hadn't called to reconcile. They'd called to use me. I thought of my patients, the families I'd helped, the life I'd carved out without their approval. My kitchen was quiet, sunlight spilling across the counter, and I felt a weight lift. I wasn't the girl begging for their love anymore. I'd built a world where I mattered. Clinics, volunteers, lives changed. Carla's call didn't pull me back, it pushed me forward. I grabbed my keys, my bag, ready for another day at the clinic, my steps light. They could handle Dad's crisis without me, just as they'd lived without me for years. I wasn't their fallback plan. I was free. The phone call from Carla lingered like a bad taste, but I pushed it aside as I stood in my apartment, staring at the stack of clinic schedules on my table. A week later, Brian texted, We need to talk, Dad's worse. My thumb hovered over the screen, my pulse quickening, not from worry but from the nerve of it. I didn't reply. Then came a knock at my door. Brian, uninvited, standing there in his tailored coat, his face a mix of desperation and arrogance. Leah, you can't just abandon Dad, he said, stepping inside without asking. I crossed my arms, my fingers digging into my sleeves, keeping my voice calm. Abandon? Like you all did to me at the wedding? His eyes flickered, but he pressed on. You're a nurse, you're supposed to help. I laughed, sharp and short, my hands dropping to my sides. Supposed to? Where was that logic when you called me, just here? His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer, just shifted his weight. Not glancing at my modest living room like it was beneath him. I stepped closer, my gaze steady. You and Dad built a world where I didn't matter. Now you want my skills? That's not family, that's hypocrisy. My voice was low, each word measured, my hands steady despite the fire in my chest. Brian stammered, We're struggling, Leah, be reasonable. I shook my head, my lips pressing into a thin line. I'm done being your backup plan. I walked to the door, holding it open, and my fingers firm on the handle. He stared, stunned, then walked out, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I shut the door, the click loud in the quiet, and leaned against it, my breath steadying. My eyes fell on a photo pinned to my fridge, me with Maria and her son at the clinic, all smiling. That was my family now, the one I'd chosen, built on respect, not convenience. I didn't feel guilt, I felt power, the kind that comes from knowing your worth. Brian's visit wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It was a last-ditch grab for control, and I'd shut it down. My phone stayed silent after that. No more texts, no more knocks. I straightened, my shoulders relaxing, and grabbed my clinic bag. The day was waiting. Patients, volunteers, real connections. I stepped outside, the morning air crisp, my steps light but firm. I wasn't just rejecting their hypocrisy. I was claiming my freedom, and it felt like breathing for the first time. After Brian's visit, I needed air, so I met my friend Jess at our favorite cafe, the one with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh scones. The contrast hit me as I walked in. Warm light, soft chatter, Jess waving me over with a grin, her hands wrapped around a steaming latte. No judgment, no hierarchy, just her. I slid into the booth, my shoulders loosening, my fingers tracing the worn edge of the table. Rough week? She asked, her eyes sharp but kind. I nodded, setting my bag down, the weight of Brian's audacity still lingering. I told her everything, Carla's call, Brian's nerve, how I'd shut the door on him. Her jaw dropped, then she laughed, her hands clapping once. Leah, you're a badass. I smiled, my chest warming, but my eyes drifted to the window, watching strangers pass. With Jess, I wasn't the invisible daughter or the convenient nurse. I was just me. We talked about the clinic, how we'd just trained 10 new volunteers, Minto, how Maria's son was thriving. Jess leaned forward, her elbows on the table, listening like every word mattered. "You're changing lives," she said, her voice steady, her gaze locked on mine. I felt my throat tighten, not from sadness but from being seen. My family's wedding had been cold, all posturing and exclusion, but here with Jess I was home. I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking softly, and thought of Dad's table, Brian's smirk, Carla's fake tears. Then I looked at Jess, her smile genuine, her hands gesturing wildly as she planned our next clinic. This was my chosen family, built on respect, not obligation. I leaned back, my fingers relaxed around my mug, the cafe's hum wrapping around me like a hug. Jess reached over, squeezing my hand, her touch grounding. "You're enough, Leah," she said, unprompted, like she knew I needed it. I squeezed back, my eyes stinging but not spilling over. The cafe's warmth, Jess's laughter, the clatter of dishes, it was everything my family's world wasn't. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had this. As we left, my steps felt lighter, my bag swinging at my side. I wasn't running from my past, I was walking toward my present, surrounded by people who saw me, not the role they wanted me to play. The street outside buzzed with life, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged in it. Back at my apartment, the quiet felt different, solid, not empty. I sat at my kitchen table, papers from the clinic spread out, my pen tapping as I planned the next free health fair. My phone buzzed, another text from Carla, this time softer, almost pleading, "Leah, please, just talk to us." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering, my jaw tight. The old me would have called back, guilt twisting my gut, but now? I set the phone down, face down, my hands steady. I wasn't falling for it. I'd spent a year building boundaries, brick by brick, after walking out of that wedding. My family didn't get to waltz back in because they needed me now. I stood, pacing, my socks soft on the hardwood, and thought about Brian's visit, his entitled tone, his assumption I'd cave. I stopped by the window, my reflection faint in the glass, and realized I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I grabbed a notepad, my pen scratching as I wrote out my rules. No contact unless it's genuine, no favors without respect, no more shrinking to fit their mold. My hand paused, the pen heavy, as I remembered Dad's voice at the wedding, praising Brian, ignoring me. That Leah was gone. I tore the page off, taped it to my fridge next to Maria's photo, my fingers pressing the edges firm. This was my fortress now. My life, my terms. When Carla called again the next day, I let it go to voicemail, her voice muffled as I chopped vegetables for dinner, the knife's rhythm grounding me. I didn't listen to the message, I didn't need to. My clinic was thriving, 50 new patients last month, a grant application in the works. I had Jess, my volunteers, people who valued me without strings. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, my shoulders relaxed, and turned up the music, a soft jazz filling the room. Their guilt trips wouldn't breach my walls. I wasn't cruel. I wished Dad well, but I wasn't his nurse or their fallback. I sat down to eat, the plate warm in my hands, the food simple but mine. The phone stayed silent, and for once that silence felt like victory. I wasn't hiding, I was standing firm, my life a testament to what I'd built without them. The jazz swelled, and I smiled, my fork pausing mid-bite, my heart steady. This was my space, my rules, and no one could take that away. The clinic was buzzing, sunlight streaming through the windows as I adjusted a blood pressure cuff on Maria's arm. Her smile was wide, her hands resting calmly in her lap, a far cry from the panicked mom I'd met 2 years ago. "You're doing great," I told her, my voice soft, my fingers steady as I noted her readings. Outside, kids laughed, learning first aid from my volunteers, their voices mixing with the hum of a community I'd built. This was my legacy. Not the family name I'd been born into, but one I'd carved out with my own hands. I thought of Dad's wedding, the last table, Brian's smirk. Those memories used to sting, but now they felt distant, like a story I'd outgrown. I moved to the next patient, an elderly man who gripped my hand, his eyes crinkling with gratitude. "You're a blessing, Leah," he said, his voice rough but warm. My chest tightened, not with pain but pride. I'd spent years chasing Dad's approval, but here, in this makeshift clinic, I was redefining what family meant. My phone stayed silent. No more calls from Carla, no texts from Brian. They'd faded just as I'd chosen to let them. I straightened, my clipboard tucked under my arm, and caught Jess's eye across the room. She winked, her hands busy sorting supplies, and I felt anchored. This was my impact. Real people. Real lives. Not the hollow praise of a family who only saw me when it suited them. As the day ended, I locked up. My keys jingling, the clinic quiet but alive with purpose. I'd turned my skills into something bigger than myself. Free health fairs, training programs, a community that trusted me. My name, Leah, wasn't tied to their dismissal anymore. It was on flyers, thank you notes, lives changed. I walked to my car, the evening air cool, my steps sure. I wasn't just a nurse or a daughter, I was a force, building something they'd never understand. My hands brushed my bag, the weight of my work inside it, and I smiled. This was my legacy, earned through sweat and heart, not inherited or begged for. I'd taken their rejection and turned it into creation, their neglect into purpose. The stars were out, sharp against the sky, and I felt like one of them, small but bright, undeniable. I didn't need their table, I'd built my own, and it was full. I stood on my apartment balcony, the city humming below, my hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, its warmth seeping into my palms. The night was quiet, just the soft rustle of leaves and distant traffic, but inside me there was peace, a deep, steady calm I'd fought for. I thought back to the wedding, the last table, the years of chasing Dad's approval, only to realize it was a mirage. My fingers traced the mug's rim, my eyes on the skyline, each light a life I'd touched through my clinics. I didn't need their validation anymore, I'd found it in myself. Maria's gratitude, Jess's laughter, the old man's hand in mine, those were my mirrors now, reflecting a woman who was enough. I set the mug down, my movements slow, deliberate, and leaned on the railing, the cool metal grounding me. The clinic's latest grant had come through today, enough to fund another year of free care. I'd done that. Not Dad, not Brian, not Carla. Me. I smiled, my breath steady, thinking of how far I'd come since that night I walked out. Their silence didn't hurt anymore. It was just noise I'd tuned out. My worth wasn't tied to their table or their approval. It lived in the lives I'd changed, the community I'd built, the quiet strength I'd found. I turned back inside, my socks soft on the floor, and glanced at the fridge. Maria's photo, my boundary list, reminders of a life I'd chosen. This was my peace, not in revenge, but in knowing I didn't need them to feel whole. I was free, not because I'd rejected them, but because I'd embraced myself. The city glowed outside, and I felt like part of it. Rooted, alive, enough. So what do you think? Did I stand my ground enough, or should I have pushed back harder? Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you ever had to walk away from people who didn't see your worth? Share your story. I'm reading everyone. This journey taught me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, who see you, who stay. I built mine from scratch and it's stronger than ever. If this hit home, hit that subscribe button for more stories about finding your own path. Keep choosing yourself. You're worth it.